The cramped back room of Murphy's General Store in Silver Creek felt more like a tomb than a home. Catherine Walsh pressed herself against the cold wall as the angry voices in the front of the store grew louder, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird desperate to escape. "Where is she, Murphy?" The voice belonged to Vincent Blackwood, the most powerful banker in the territory, and the man who owned her father's debts and, by extension, owned her. "I know you're hiding her somewhere. I told you," Blackwood came. Murphy's gruff reply, "I haven't seen Catherine Walsh in weeks. Maybe she finally came to her senses and left town." Catherine closed her eyes, fighting back tears of gratitude. For 3 months now, old Murphy had been letting her sleep in his storage room, bringing her scraps of food and keeping her existence secret from the world that wanted to claim her as payment for her father's gambling debts. 3 months since, her father had died of a heart attack, leaving her with nothing but a mountain of IOUs and the terrible knowledge that Blackwood considered her part of the collateral. 3 months of hiding in shadows, of existing rather than living, of watching her once vibrant spirit slowly die from shame and fear. "Her debt doesn't disappear just because she does." Blackwood's voice was cold as winter steel. "Patrick Walsh owed me $800, and if his daughter thinks she can escape that obligation by playing hide and seek, she's got another think coming." "The girl don't owe you nothing," Murphy shot back. "Debts die with the debtor, and you know it." "Not when the debtor offered his daughter as surety," Blackwood replied, and Catherine could hear the cruel smile in his voice. "I have the papers. Right here, Murphy. Signed and witnessed. Catherine Walsh belongs to me until every penny is paid." Catherine's stomach lurched. She had known her father was desperate near the end, but she had never imagined he would sink so low as to use her as collateral. The betrayal cut deeper than the fear, leaving her feeling hollowed out and worthless. The voices eventually faded as Blackwood left, but Catherine remained pressed against the wall, too numb to move. She was 23 years old, but felt ancient worn, down by months of hiding, of scraping by on charity, of living in constant terror of discovery. A soft knock on the back door made her jump. Murphy's weathered face appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "He's gone, but he'll be back." Murphy said quietly, "Catherine, this can't go on much longer. Winter's coming, and I can't keep hiding you forever. Blackwood's got the law on his side, corrupt as it is." "I know," Catherine whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. "I'm sorry, Mr. Murphy. I never meant to bring trouble to your door. Ain't your fault, girl. Your pa was a good man before the gambling took hold of him. But facts is facts. You need a way out of this mess before Blackwood decides to take matters into his own hands." Before Catherine could respond, they heard the sound of a horse approaching. Murphy quickly gestured for her to stay hidden while he went to see who it was. Catherine listened as Murphy greeted someone with obvious respect and warmth, a tone she hadn't heard him use with anyone else. "Daniel, good to see you, son." "What brings you to town?" "Supplies, mostly," came the reply in a deep, warm voice that Catherine didn't recognize. "And I wanted to check on that order of seed we talked about. Think it'll be in soon?" "Should be any day now. You planning to expand that north pasture come spring?" "That's the idea. Ranch is doing well enough that I can afford to take some risks." Catherine found herself drawn to the stranger's voice. There was something solid and reassuring about it, something that spoke of competence and quiet confidence. It had been so long since she'd heard a voice that didn't carry threats or pity. "Daniel." Murphy's voice dropped to a more serious tone. "You still looking for someone to help with the household duties? Someone reliable?" Catherine's heart skipped a beat. Murphy wouldn't, would he? "I am, actually," Daniel replied. "Place gets pretty lonely, and I'm tired of eating my own cooking." "Why, you know someone." There was a long pause, and Catherine could practically feel Murphy's internal struggle. Finally, he spoke in a voice so low she had to strain to hear. "Maybe. But it's complicated, Daniel. Real complicated." "How complicated?" Another pause. Then Murphy seemed to come to a decision. "Come around back with me. There's someone you should meet." Catherine's blood turned to ice. What was Murphy thinking? She couldn't meet anyone, couldn't risk Blackwood finding out where she was. But before she could protest, Murphy was opening the door to her hiding place. and she found herself face to face with a stranger. Daniel Hawthorne was not what she had expected. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. He had kind eyes the color of dark honey and an expression of immediate concern. When he saw her huddled in the corner, "Miss," he said softly, removing his head in a gesture of respect, "are you all right?" Catherine realized how she must look pale from months of hiding indoors, thin from irregular meals, wearing a dress that had once been fine but was now patched and faded. She was a shadow of the woman she had been before her father's death, and the pity in the stranger's eyes confirmed her worst fears about herself. "This is Catherine Walsh," Murphy said quietly. "Catherine, this is Daniel Hawthorne. He owns the Double H Ranch about 20 miles west of here." "Walsh," Daniel repeated, and Catherine saw recognition dawn in his eyes. "You're Patrick Walsh's daughter." Catherine nodded miserably, waiting for him to make his excuses and leave. Everyone in the territory knew about her father's debts by now, about Blackwood's claim on her, but Daniel didn't leave. Instead, he looked at Murphy with a puzzled expression. "I heard she'd disappeared after her father died. People figured she'd left the territory. She's been hiding here," Murphy explained. "Blackwood's claiming she owes him $800. Says he's got papers making her responsible for her past gambling debts." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's not legal. Debts don't transfer to children unless they co-signed. Tell that to Blackwood." Murphy said grimly, "He's got Judge Morrison in his pocket, and the sheriff won't cross him. Far as the law in this county is concerned, Catherine belongs to Blackwood until the debt's paid." Catherine watched Daniel's face as he processed this information. She expected to see the same calculating look that most men got when they heard about her situation, the look that said they were wondering how they might profit from her desperation. Instead, she saw anger. Clean, righteous anger at the injustice of her situation. "That's barbaric," Daniel said flatly. "She's not property to be bought and sold." "No," Murphy agreed, "but try telling that to Blackwood. Man's got a mean streak a mile wide and the power to indulge it." Daniel turned to look at Catherine directly, and she forced herself to meet his gaze despite her shame. "Miss Walsh, if you don't mind me asking, what do you want to do, assuming you had choices?" I mean, the question surprised her. No one had asked what she wanted in months. Everyone, Murphy included, had been focused on what she needed, what was practical, what was safe. But what did she want? "I want to live," she said quietly, the words surprising her with their honesty. "Not hide, not just exist. I want to feel like a human being again, instead of a problem to be solved." Daniel nodded slowly. "Murphy, could you give us a minute?" Murphy looked between them, then shrugged and stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Daniel settled himself on a wooden crate across from Catherine, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Miss Walsh, I'm going to be direct with you because I think you deserve honesty. My ranch needs a housekeeper, someone to cook, clean, help manage the household. It's hard work, but it's honest work, and it pays well enough." Catherine's heart began to race. "Mr. Hawthorne, I appreciate the offer, but you don't understand. If Blackwood finds out where I am, let me worry about Blackwood." Daniel interrupted. "My ranch is in the next county over, outside his immediate sphere of influence, and I've got enough men working for me that he'd think twice before trying anything. But the debt is between your father and Blackwood. You're not responsible for it, no matter what papers he claims to have. In a fair court with an honest judge, those papers wouldn't be worth the ink they're written on." Catherine stared at him, trying to understand why this stranger would risk Blackwood's anger to help her. "What's in it for you, Mr. Hawthorne? Why would you take such a risk for someone you've never met?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, and Catherine saw something like pain flicker across his features. "Because everyone deserves a chance to start over," he said finally. "Because hiding in back rooms is no way for anyone to live. And because—" He paused, then continued more softly, "because my ranch has been too quiet for too long. It could use some life in it." Catherine felt tears threatening and fought them back. She had cried enough in the past 3 months to last a lifetime. "Mr. Hawthorne, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking," Daniel said firmly. "I'm offering. The question is whether you're brave enough to take the chance." Catherine looked into his honest brown eyes and saw something she had almost forgotten existed: hope. This man was offering her a way out of the shadow existence she'd been living, a chance to reclaim her dignity and her life. "What if I'm not the person you think I am?" she asked quietly. "What if I'm too broken to be fixed?" Daniel's smile was gentle but certain. "Miss Walsh, I've been ranching for 15 years. I've seen horses that were so mistreated people said they'd never be good for anything again. But with patience and kindness, most of them come back to life. I have a feeling you're stronger than you know." Catherine took a shaky breath, hardly daring to believe that this might be real. "When would you want me to start?" "How about right now?" Daniel stood and extended his hand to her. "Unless you'd rather spend another night in Murphy's storage room." Catherine looked at his outstretched hand, calloused from honest work, steady with quiet strength, offering her a lifeline she had stopped believing would come. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger. "Yes, Mr. Hawthorne, I'll come with you." As she took his hand and felt his firm, reassuring grip, Catherine allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in months: the possibility that her life wasn't over after all. The ride to the Double H Ranch took 3 hours through some of the most beautiful country Catherine had ever seen. Rolling hills covered in golden grass stretched toward distant mountains, and the afternoon sun painted everything in warm, honeyed light. After months of being confined to Murphy's cramped storage room, the vast open spaces felt like a revelation. Daniel had given her his coat for the ride, and she wrapped it around herself like armor, breathing in the scent of leather and sage and something indefinably masculine that was uniquely his. He rode beside her in comfortable silence, occasionally pointing out landmarks or wildlife, but never pressing her to talk when she wasn't ready. "Those are my cattle," he said as they crested a hill and saw hundreds of red and white animals grazing peacefully in the valley below. Herefords, mostly. Hardy breed, good for this climate. Catherine watched the cattle with fascination. It had been so long since she'd seen anything that represented prosperity and peace. Her father's last years had been filled with increasing desperation, and her months in hiding had shown her only the underbelly of human nature. "How many do you have?" she asked, surprised by the sound of her own voice. She had spoken so little. In recent months that conversation felt strange. "About 800 head right now," Daniel replied. "Been building the herd for the past 5 years. Market's good for beef, and the railroads made shipping easier." As they approached the ranch buildings, Catherine felt her breath catch. The main house was substantial, but not ostentatious, a 2-story log and stone structure with a wraparound porch and large windows that would let in plenty of light. There was a barn, several outbuildings, and corrals where horses moved with easy grace. "It's beautiful," Catherine said softly. "Thank you," Daniel replied, and she could hear the pride in his voice. "Built most of it myself, with help from the crew. Took the better part of 10 years, but it's exactly what I wanted." Several men emerged from the barn as they approached, and Catherine felt her old anxiety return. She had grown so accustomed to hiding that being seen by strangers felt dangerous. "Easy," Daniel said quietly, noticing her tension. "These are good men. They work for me, and they follow my lead. If I say you're welcome here, you're welcome here." The men who approached were a varied group, some young, some older, all with the lean, competent look of experienced ranch hands. Daniel introduced them briefly. Tom, the foreman; Miguel, who handled the horses; old Pete, who had worked cattle longer than anyone; and several others whose names Catherine tried to remember through her nervousness. "Boys," Daniel said simply, "this is Miss Catherine Walsh. She's going to be helping me run the house. I expect you to treat her with the same respect you'd show any lady." The men nodded politely, touching their hat brims in greeting. Catherine was surprised to see no speculation or judgment in their faces, just the mild interest of men being introduced to their employer's housekeeper. "Welcome to the Double H, miss," said Tom, the foreman. "If you need anything or have any trouble, you just let us know." "Thank you," Catherine managed, still hardly believing that she was standing in the open air, talking to people who treated her like a normal human being, instead of a problem to be solved. Daniel led her to the house, and Catherine's anxiety spiked again as they approached the front door. This was really happening. She was really going to work for this man, live in his house, try to build a new life from the ashes of her old one. "Catherine," Daniel said softly, stopping before they went inside, "I want you to know something. This is your home now, for as long as you want it to be. You're not a servant here, you're a valued member of the household. The work is important, but so are you." Catherine felt tears prick at her eyes. When was the last time someone had told her she was valued? "Why are you being so kind to me?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, looking out over his ranch. "Because kindness matters," he said finally. "Because everyone deserves dignity and respect. And because," he paused, then continued more softly, "because I know what it's like to feel lost and alone." Before Catherine could ask what he meant, Daniel opened the front door and led her inside. The interior of the house was as impressive as the exterior, spacious rooms with high ceilings, comfortable furniture, and large windows that filled the space with natural light. It was clearly the home of a successful man, but it felt somehow empty, as if it were waiting for something to bring it to life. "This would be your room," Daniel said, opening a door off the main hallway to reveal a bedroom that was larger and more comfortable than any space Catherine had called her own since childhood. There was a real bed with clean linens, a dresser, a washstand, and even a small fireplace. "It's wonderful," Catherine breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood of the dresser. "Mr. Hawthorne, I don't know how to thank you. Just call me Daniel," he said with a smile. "And you can thank me by making this place feel like a home instead of just a house." Over the next few hours, Daniel showed Catherine around the rest of the house, explaining routines and expectations. The kitchen was well equipped, but clearly underused. Daniel had been living on simple fare for too long. The sitting room had comfortable chairs but felt formal and unlived in. The whole house had the feeling of a space that was maintained but not truly inhabited. "I'm not much of a cook," Daniel admitted as they stood in the kitchen. "I can manage beans and bacon, coffee, and hardtack, but that's about it. The men and I usually eat together in the bunkhouse, but it would be nice to have real meals again." "I can cook," Catherine said, feeling more confident as they talked about practical matters. "My mother taught me before she died, and I've had plenty of practice." "What kinds of things do you like?" "Anything that doesn't come out of a can," Daniel said with a laugh. "I'm not particular, Catherine. Just having someone care enough to make real food will be luxury enough." As evening approached, Daniel left Catherine to settle into her room, while he went to check on some business with his foreman. Alone for the first time in the house that was now her home, Catherine allowed herself to truly absorb what had happened. This morning, she had been hiding in a storage room, terrified and hopeless. Tonight, she was standing in a comfortable bedroom in a beautiful house, with honest work to do and a man who treated her with respect and kindness. She walked to the window and looked out over the ranch as the sun set behind the mountains. The view was breathtaking, vast and open and free, everything her life hadn't been for months. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Catherine, may I come in?" "Of course," she called, turning as Daniel entered carrying a tray. "I thought you might be hungry," he said, setting the tray on the small table by the window. "It's not much, just some bread and cheese and coffee, but I figured you might want to eat something before tomorrow." Catherine looked at the simple meal and felt her throat tighten with emotion. It wasn't the food itself that moved her, but the thoughtfulness behind it, the fact that this man had considered her comfort and acted on it. "Daniel," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you really bring me here? And please don't say it's just because you need a housekeeper. You could have hired anyone for that." Daniel leaned against the doorframe, his expression thoughtful. "You want the honest truth?" Catherine nodded. "Because when I saw you in that storage room, you reminded me of myself 5 years ago, lost, alone, convinced that I wasn't worth much to anybody. Someone gave me a chance, then helped me buy this land when the bank wouldn't loan to me. If he hadn't taken that risk, I'd probably be drifting from job to job, never amounting to much." "What happened to him?" Catherine asked. "He died 2 years ago, heart attack. But before he died, he made me promise something." Daniel's voice grew softer. He made me promise that if I ever had the chance to help someone the way he helped me, I wouldn't hesitate. Catherine stared at him, understanding beginning to dawn. You're not just giving me a job, you're paying forward a debt. I'm giving you what someone gave me a chance to prove what you're worth. The rest is up to you. Catherine felt something inside her chest that had been frozen for months begin to thaw. This man wasn't offering her charity or pity, he was offering her opportunity, dignity, and most importantly, hope. I won't let you down, she said quietly. I know you won't, Daniel replied with quiet confidence. Get some rest, Catherine. Tomorrow we start building your new life. After he left, Catherine sat by the window eating her simple meal and watching the stars come out over the valley. For the first time in months, she fell asleep not to the sound of her own tears, but to the gentle sounds of a working ranch settling into peaceful night. And for the first time in months, she dreamed not of debts and threats and hiding places, but of tomorrow's possibilities. 6 weeks had passed since Catherine arrived at the Double H Ranch, and the transformation was remarkable. The hollow-eyed, frightened woman who had hidden in Murphy's storage room was slowly being replaced by someone Catherine barely recognized, someone with color in her cheeks, strength in her movements, and light in her eyes. The work had been exactly what she needed, cooking for Daniel and occasionally for the ranch hands, keeping the house clean and organized, tending the small garden behind the kitchen. It all gave her purpose and routine that her months of hiding had lacked. More importantly, it gave her back her sense of worth. These biscuits are better than anything my mother used to make, Daniel said over breakfast, reaching for his third one. Where did you learn to cook like this? Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. Practice, mostly. And desperation. You were living on beans and hardtack when I got here. I was afraid you'd waste away. Daniel laughed, and Catherine realized how much she had come to love that sound. In the weeks she'd been here, she had watched him relax in ways that suggested he had been carrying his own burdens. Before she arrived, the lonely rancher who had rescued her had apparently needed rescuing himself. Catherine, Daniel said, his tone becoming more serious, we need to talk about something. Catherine's stomach dropped. In her experience, we need to talk was usually followed by bad news. What is it? Tom rode into Silver Creek yesterday for supplies. Word is that Blackwood's been asking questions again, offering a reward for information about your whereabouts. Catherine set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. She had almost allowed herself to believe that Blackwood had given up, that she was truly safe here. How much is he offering? $50, Daniel said grimly. That's a lot of money to most folks around here. Catherine felt the familiar cold grip of fear in her chest. I should leave. I should have left weeks ago. I never should have brought this danger to your door. Catherine, stop. Daniel's voice was firm but gentle. You're not going anywhere. This is your home now. But if he finds me, if he finds you, he'll have to go through me first. Daniel reached across the table and took her hands in his. Catherine, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You are not alone anymore. You have a home here. You have people who care about you, and you have me. Blackwood doesn't get to take that away. Catherine looked into his warm brown eyes and saw absolute conviction there. But she also saw something else, something that made her heart race and her cheeks flush. Daniel, she said softly, What are you saying? Before he could answer, the sound of hoof beats outside interrupted them. Daniel rose and looked out the window, his expression growing grim. Riders coming, he said. About a dozen of them, riding hard. Catherine's blood turned to ice. Is it? I think so. Daniel moved to a gun cabinet and pulled out a rifle, checking to make sure it was loaded. Catherine, I want you to go to your room and stay there until this is over. No, Catherine said, standing up with sudden determination. I'm tired of hiding, Daniel. I'm tired of running. If Blackwood wants me, he can face me. Catherine, no. Her voice was stronger than she had heard it in months. I won't cower in a back room anymore. Whatever happens, we face it together. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Together then. But stay behind me. The riders pulled up in front of the house with a thunder of hooves and dust. Blackwood himself led them, his expensive suit and polished boots looking out of place among the working ranch hands he had brought with him. Catherine recognized several faces from Silver Creek men who would do anything for money. Daniel stepped onto the porch with Catherine beside him, his rifle held casually but ready. "Morning, Blackwood. You're a long way from your bank." "Not as far as I'd like to be, Hawthorne," Blackwood replied, his cold eyes fixed on Catherine. "I've come for what's mine." "I don't see anything here that belongs to you," Daniel said evenly. "The woman does." Blackwood pulled out a folded paper. "I have legal documents stating that Catherine Walsh is responsible for her father's debts. She belongs to me until every penny is paid." "Those documents aren't worth the paper they're printed on," Daniel replied. "Children aren't responsible for their parents' debts, and no court with any integrity would uphold such a claim." "Judge Morrison disagrees," Blackwood said with a cruel smile. "And he's the only judge whose opinion matters in this county." Catherine stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Mr. Blackwood, I never signed any agreement making me responsible for my father's debts. Whatever papers you have, my signature isn't on them." "Your father had the authority to sign for you," Blackwood replied smoothly. "You were living in his household, under his protection. That made you subject to his decisions." "That's not how the law works," Daniel said, his voice growing cold. "And even if it were, we're not in your county anymore. We're in Montana County, where Judge Parker actually follows the law instead of taking bribes." Blackwood's face darkened. "Careful, Hawthorne. You're making accusations you can't prove." "Try me," Daniel said simply. The tension stretched taut between the two men. Catherine could see Blackwood's hired guns shifting nervously in their saddles, clearly not expecting this level of resistance. "Besides," Daniel continued, "there's something else you should know about Miss Walsh's situation." "And what's that?" Blackwood asked suspiciously. Daniel turned to Catherine with a smile that made her heart skip a beat. "Tell him, Mrs. Hawthorne." Catherine's breath caught. "Mrs. Hawthorne?" But even as her mind reeled with confusion, she saw the truth in Daniel's eyes and understood what he was offering her: not just protection, but a real future, a real life. "That's right," Catherine said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I'm Mrs. Daniel Hawthorne now. I'm a married woman, which means any claims you might have had on me are legally void." Blackwood's face went white with rage. "You're lying. There's no record of any marriage. We were married in Montana City 3 days ago," Daniel said calmly. "Judge Parker performed the ceremony himself. The paperwork is all properly filed and recorded." It was a bluff, Catherine realized, but a brilliant one. Blackwood couldn't disprove it without riding to Montana City himself, and by the time he did that, they could make it true. "This isn't over," Blackwood snarled. "I don't care who you think you've married, girl. You still owe me $800, and I'll collect it one way or another." "Actually," came a new voice from behind the house, "I think you'll find that debt has been satisfied." Everyone turned to see Murphy riding up with 2 other men. Judge Parker from Montana City, and, to Catherine's amazement, a well-dressed stranger she didn't recognize. "Murphy," Daniel called out, clearly as surprised as everyone else. "Sorry we're late," Murphy said with a grin. "Had to stop by the bank in Montana City first." He pulled out a piece of paper and waved it at Blackwood. "Funny thing, Vincent. When I looked into those debts you claim Patrick Walsh owed you, I found some interesting discrepancies." "What are you talking about?" Blackwood demanded. Judge Parker spoke up, his voice carrying the authority of honest law. "Mr. Blackwood, we've been investigating your lending practices for some time. What we've discovered is a pattern of illegal, usury, forged documents, and fraudulent claims against the estates of deceased borrowers." The well-dressed stranger stepped forward. "I'm Federal Marshal Williams, Vincent Blackwood. You're under arrest for fraud, extortion, and violation of federal banking regulations." Catherine watched in amazement as Blackwood's world crumbled around him. His hired guns, seeing which way the wind was blowing, began to quietly distance themselves from their employer. The debt Catherine Walsh supposedly owed never existed. Judge Parker continued. Her father's actual debts were paid in full before his death. The documents Mr. Blackwood presented were forgeries, designed to give him legal cover for what amounts to attempted kidnapping. Furthermore, Marshal Williams added, We've found evidence that Mr. Blackwood has perpetrated similar schemes against at least a dozen other families in the territory. He's going to be facing federal charges as the marshal's men placed Blackwood in shackles. The banker's cold composure finally cracked. "This isn't over," he screamed at Catherine. "You think you've won, but it is over." Daniel said firmly, "Catherine is free, Blackwood. She always was. You never had any legal claim on her." Catherine watched Blackwood being led away, hardly able to believe that the nightmare that had dominated her life for months was finally ending. But even as relief flooded through her, she realized there was still one important matter to address. "Daniel," she said quietly as the crowd dispersed, "about what you said earlier, about us being married." Daniel's expression grew serious. "Catherine, I'm sorry about that. I had to think of something to protect you, and it was the first thing that came to mind. I know it puts you in an awkward position." "Actually," Catherine said, taking his hands in hers, "I was wondering if we could make it true." Daniel's eyes widened. "Catherine, these past weeks have been the happiest of my life," Catherine continued, her cheeks flushing but her voice steady. "Not just because I was safe, but because I was with you. You didn't just bring me back to life. Daniel, you made me remember what life is supposed to feel like." "Are you sure?" Daniel asked softly. "I don't want you to feel obligated because I helped you. I want you to choose me because you want to, not because you feel you have to." Catherine smiled, thinking of all the ways this man had shown her kindness, respect, and love without ever asking for anything in return. "Daniel Hawthorne, I choose you. Not because I owe you anything, but because I love you. Because you saw worth in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Because you gave me back my life, and then offered to share yours." "Catherine Walsh," Daniel said, pulling her into his arms, "will you marry me, really marry me? Not just as protection, but as my partner, my love, my wife." "Yes," Catherine whispered. And then louder, "Yes, Daniel, yes to all of it." When he kissed her there on the porch of the ranch that had become her sanctuary, Catherine felt the last of her fear and shame fall away. She was no longer the broken woman who had hidden in storage rooms. She was Catherine Walsh, soon to be Catherine Hawthorne, a woman who had been buried in debt and despair, but had been brought back to life by love. 3 months later, at their real wedding ceremony at the ranch, Judge Parker pronounced them husband and wife in front of all their friends and neighbors. As they danced under the stars to music played by the ranch hands, Catherine marveled at the journey that had brought her here. What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked, spinning her gently in his arms. "About how sometimes what looks like the end is really just the beginning," Catherine replied, her eyes bright with happiness. "About how the darkest moments can lead to the most beautiful dawns." And Daniel prompted, seeing there was more, "and about how grateful I am that a lonely rancher decided to take a chance on a woman who had forgotten how to live." "Well," Daniel said, pulling her closer, "this rancher isn't lonely anymore. And this woman is very much alive." As they danced in the starlight, surrounded by the life they had built together, Catherine knew that she had found something worth more than freedom from debt. She had found home, love, and the truth that sometimes the best way to save someone else is to let them save you in return. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of love conquering despair. Hit that notification bell to never miss our inspiring tales of second chances and new beginnings.